Hello again to everybody, and welcome to our August session of BusinessWise Insiders. Before we get started, just a quick overview of what you guys can expect today. First, I'll walk through the presentation, during which I'll keep everybody on mute just to minimize any inadvertent disruptions and keep everything moving. Presentation should last about 20 to 25 minutes, after which we'd normally divide into breakout rooms, but I think we'll just take everyone off mute and have one big group discussion today, given the smaller number of attendees. And at that point, you'll have a chance to introduce yourself and ask questions or offer your own perspective on some of the ideas we'll cover today. And obviously, you can avail yourself of our full slate of wise guys representing our three markets: Atlanta, Charlotte, and Dallas-Fort Worth. So with that, why don't we jump into the topic? So today we're going to be talking about the idea of sales crutches, how and when and why sales reps use them, how crutches can help you engage with prospects, and more importantly for today's presentation, how they often can hurt your effort to engage prospects, set appointments, and build relationships that lead to sales. Before we get into the details, let's just start with a quick definition. So what is a sales crutch? And the way I'm defining it here is that it's a go-to script, question, or tactic that sales reps rely on to help them engage with a new prospect. And crutches can present a real challenge for a variety of reasons. Some of them are just natural tendencies that might align with your personality or way of doing things that can make you more comfortable interacting with strangers, which is what a lot of cold B2B outreach amounts to. And it's not easy to break those kinds of tendencies, so that's one challenge. But even more challenging, many sales crutches are actually the result of years of sales training and have become part of the sort of conventional wisdom of B2B sales today. And many of them represent a holdover from the way sales used to work. So even as the world of B2B sales has changed and shifted, sales trainers have been teaching these scripts and tactics for years without questioning whether they're still relevant or even smart. In full disclosure, a lot of the approach that we push here at BusinessWise relies on some of these same kinds of tactics. So this presentation is an opportunity to examine some of these tactics and learn together about how to use them in a smarter way. And all of this is to say that there's nothing inherently wrong with using a sales crutch as we've defined it here. And in fact, scripts, questions, and tactics can be helpful as long as you have a strong foundation built on the idea of providing value to your prospects. But if you're not careful, falling back on sales crutches can actually shift your focus away from that critical idea and give your prospects a reason to say no, which is obviously the opposite of what their intent is. And a lot of the ideas we'll cover today came from a blog post that I recently came across called "How Would You Sell Without a Solution?" It's by a sales expert named Anthony Iannarino, who runs a blog called The Sales Blog. And if you're not familiar with him, I would strongly recommend that you check it out. And I'll be sure to link to the article in our follow-up email to today's attendees, so keep an eye out for that. And one of the reasons it caught my eye is that in an insider session from a few months ago, we discussed what it means to provide value to your customers at every decision point, particularly at the very beginning of the sales process when your prospect isn't thinking about buying, can't ever imagine doing business with you, and may not even know they have a problem worth fixing. And at the end of that presentation, I posed a question for consideration and discussion. And that was, if you couldn't offer your product, how would you help your client achieve better results? So today we're going to try something similar, keying off of Anthony Iannarino's blog post. So here's a thought experiment. Imagine you are meeting with a new prospect in an industry where you have a record of helping companies improve their results, but you couldn't use any of your go-to sales crutches. So specifically, the rules are you can't mention your company, you can't ask personal questions or attempt to build rapport with your prospects, you can't mention your products, and perhaps most challenging, you can't ask questions about your prospects' pain points. And a couple of quick points before we start. We're going to take a closer look at the specific sales crutches listed here, why sales reps use them, why they might hurt your effort to set first appointments. But remember, this is a thought experiment. designed to get you thinking about what motivates prospects to act and how you can do a better job of encouraging that action. Obviously, it would be unrealistic to expect any sales reps to avoid using these crutches entirely. The point is to be smart about how and when you use your crutches so you can be sure you're focused on demonstrating maximum value. And before I dive into the individual sales crutches, Deb, did you have anything you'd like to mention at this point?
Well, certainly, Sam, I agree that the world of B2B sales is changing, and some of the ways that it's changing has to do with the principles of consultative sales, which are valuable to all of us, are not enough anymore. And in addition to being consultative salespeople, we really need to be value creators at every stage of the sales process. So the first sale that we're making to everybody is to try and get our prospects to commit to the time to meet with us. And it's, as y'all know, it's not easy. And I hope today's presentation will help you think about it in a little different way.
Right, and I think, regular insiders attendees know we really hammer home that point of providing value at each decision point, even if somebody doesn't become a client. The hardest thing is, so often when our minds go to how do we provide value, we think about our product and our company. And in reality, the value you provide has very little to do with those things at earlier stages in the process. So that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. So the first crutch is your company. So it's probably the simplest and most straightforward. It's the fact that you are representing your company as a starting point in an interaction with your prospects. So if I start off a cold call or email by saying, I'm Sam Mitchell and I'm with BusinessWise, I'm immediately falling back onto that first crutch. So let's first look at why the crutch helps. So first and foremost, it establishes credibility by identifying who you are and who you're representing. If your company has a relatively well-known and easily recognizable brand, that's even better. And that in turn can be an important tool in building initial rapport with a prospect. And finally, it puts the focus on your solution, which at the surface, what your company offers is where you want to eventually steer your prospects. But here's the other side of the coin. First, at the very beginning of the sales process, your prospects really don't care about your company at all. They care about their company, and they're going to measure the value of the interaction in terms of how and whether their company will benefit from the interaction. So in fact, mentioning your company can have the opposite of its intended effect by adding a sort of friction and giving your prospect a reason to resist. So even if your prospect has never heard of your company, the mere mention of it can start your prospect thinking, have I ever heard of or done business with that firm before, shifting their attention away from the value that you're offering. And that's really an important point. Both you and your prospect should be focused on the value you're offering. You want to be focused on it, but you also want your prospect's attention focused on it as well. Too much reliance on who you work for and who you're representing serves only to distract from that really singularly important concept. And just as an aside, some of you may recall that we recommend using a cold call script that we call the double handshake. And one of its core features is that it intentionally excludes any mention of your company and clarifies that you and your prospect have never met, since the goal is for your prospect to be entirely focused on the question of continuing the conversation. And so for each of these sales crutches, I've put together a trio of questions that I think can help you thinking about why it's a crutch and what you're really trying to get at. And the first question you should be asking yourself, as Deb alluded to, is what decision is your prospect making at the moment you're interacting with them? In a cold call or cold email, the decision they are definitely not making is whether to do business with you or your company. So usually the decision they're making is much simpler. Should I open this email? Should I take this call? Should I continue this conversation? Should I agree to another meeting? And since that's where they are, that's where you should be. So ask yourself what information would help them make a better decision, and then how can you provide that information? Deborah, did you want to add anything?
So our prospects are not taking our class for the most part, and they're going to probably resist a different way of handling things. So when you try to talk about some of the value that Sam's going to talk about later, don't be surprised when your prospects go to their old crutches and start asking, well, how much does it cost? Or why are you different than my current supplier? But don't get sucked in, and keep in mind where you're trying to go and what your goals are, and help the prospect align with the value that's important for the decision of them committing to spending time with you.
So moving on to the second crutch, and this one is one that most sales reps really pride themselves on and probably the hardest to shake. It may be even sort of the first place you try to go when things get difficult. What if you weren't allowed to use your rapport building skills with the prospect? What if you couldn't ask personal questions or use your warm personality to create a bond with your prospects? And of course, rapport building is a huge part of sales, and with good reason. Rapport building fosters likability, familiarity, and unity, all of which can help nudge a prospect who may be on the fence toward a yes. And we've talked about those concepts in combination with a few others in our presentation on psychological triggers that encourage people toward action. But most importantly, rapport building can really lay the foundation for a relationship based on trust, which is where you're trying to get to in any sales relationship. But at the end of the day, your prospect doesn't make decisions based on who they have the best rapport with. And sales reps who rely too heavily on rapport building can fall into a few traps. First, striving to create rapport can mean that both you and your prospect are getting too comfortable when the real objective should be honesty, which isn't always comfortable. Value is most likely perceived when you're challenging your prospect to think about things in a different way, which is outside of a comfort zone. And conversely, if you care too much about whether your prospect likes you or not, you may not be willing to be honest with them. And then finally, those warm and fuzzy feelings don't really provide any actual value to your prospect's business. Ultimately, they need substance in addition to rapport. So here are 3 quick questions that can help emphasize why you need more than just rapport to motivate your prospect to action. Does your rapport building make you unique? Does your rapport building serve your prospects? And then more importantly, what is more valuable to your prospect, your personality or your insights? And again, fortunately for all of us with winning personalities, we get to use our rapport building skills in the real world, but rapport with substance is essential in today's sales environment, and more powerful by orders of magnitude than rapport without substance. Deb, did you want to add anything before I moved on?
Go ahead, Sam.
So let's move on to maybe the crutchiest crutch of all, which is your product. And we all love our products. We pour our hearts into them and really believe they can solve all our clients' problems. And with the right customer, with the right problem, they can. And we've seen it a million times. That's why we get so excited about talking about it. But when we're prospecting, talking about our product lets us provide those specific details about our solution. And it also lets us talk about the thing we know best, which makes us feel more confident and authoritative. And finally, it's the main thing that differentiates our companies and what we offer from our competitors and what they offer, because no one has a product or service exactly like ours. But the downsides of focusing too heavily on our products are pretty significant. You've heard this tune before, but talking about your product puts the focus in the wrong place on you, your company, and your solution, when what your prospect really cares about is their own challenges, priorities, and goals. They care about their bottom line and how to grow it. Perhaps more than anything else, talking about your product centers the conversation, again, on a decision that your prospect isn't currently making or even thinking about, which is whether to buy. So when you force them to decide whether to buy from you by talking about your product, rather than to decide whether to keep talking with you at the beginning of the process, you're sort of teeing them up to say no, because they're not even at the point where they're considering the value of buying. And it's why one of our new rules of lead generation has always been to sell your prospect on the benefits of an appointment rather than the benefits of your product. So you think about what I'm doing, my new product is my time with me. I'm going to then sell them on the features and benefits of that rather than the features and benefits of my product. So what are the benefits of an appointment? Here are a few general frames you can use. prospect says, what's in it for me? First and foremost, free knowledge, the opportunity to brainstorm about problems and solutions and to gain new ideas. Another benefit is that there are obviously no strings attached. The appointment is there whether or not they become a client, so they get anything, they get valuable information without having to pay a cost other than their time, and then that it's a two-way street. When you frame it as not just seller buyer and that both parties benefit from an open and honest discussion, they're more likely to see it as a level playing field. But if I had to boil it down to 3 questions, here are the ones I would encourage you to think about and answer for yourselves. Why should your prospect meet with you even if they never buy from you? What value do you yourself add to the buying experience? So in other words, what does your prospect get out of working with you toward a decision rather than working by themselves toward a decision? And then more specifically, what insights, ideas, and experiences make you unique? Something about what you've done and what you know is different than what anyone else can bring to the table. And finding it and sharing it is what's going to set you apart. Deborah, did you want to add anything?
When your prospects pause and think about something you've said or asked, and they respond, gee, I'm not sure, I haven't thought about that before, you need to pat yourself on the back, because that is bringing value and insights and a new way of thinking. And if you are prepared with those kinds of insights in terms of, it could be the economic conditions or the political conditions or something psychological that's going on today, and help a prospect think about something that's going to be important to their business in the next 12 months. Those things are wonderful and don't just come up by shooting the breeze. These are things you need to be thinking about yourself, reading a lot of information, not only about your business and your prospect's business, but the general business community. And you need to be talking with your colleagues, coming to insiders, sharing these ideas, because this is what's going to spur your prospects in realizing the value that you bring to them.
Yeah, and I would just add that, it's obviously important to learn as much as you can outside of your regular sales experience about what's happening in your clients' industries and your own. But a lot of this you already know because you work with clients in certain industries, and you probably know that industry inside and out better than even your clients do. And you certainly know your own industry better than your client does, and have seen what's changed, what's new, what's different. Those are all things that you can share with a prospect that will potentially shift his or her perspective about where their company is going and what challenges they'll face. And actually, this is a good segue to the final crutch, which is questions that are designed to elicit information about your prospect's pain. And I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that this is especially challenging. It's really interesting because it's probably going to go against a lot of what you've been told by professional sales trainers and what you may have even learned in previous insider sessions. But let's start with why these kinds of questions can help. First, they put the focus on your prospects and what they care about, rather than you, your company, and your product, which is important and a key difference between this crutch and the previous 3 I've covered in this presentation. Second, questions get your prospect talking so you can listen and react, which again is very important. And then finally, getting your prospect to open up about their problems can help you to begin to gently lead them toward your solution. So these are all really good things on the face of it. But while questions are undeniably important, the wrong kinds of questions, the wrong time, actually won't help all that much. First, it's not a differentiator in today's B2B sales landscape. Almost every sales rep asks these same kinds of pain questions, which makes it hard for the prospect to discern any real value from any individual sales rep asking them. Second, and this is really important, questions like, what are your current challenges, or what keeps you up at night? Focus on problems that your prospect already knows they have. So you asking about them provides really no new information. And that's really the key here. Questions about your prospect's pain give you information. They are more valuable to you than to your prospects. If you've ever attended a previous Insider session where we covered our 7 key skills of master sales hunters, you may remember that we talked about identifying a prospect's pain as a key differentiator between successful sales reps and mediocre ones. It's not just about discovering pain, it's about anticipating pain, both current and future, that your prospect may not even realize they have. So here are a few questions to help you think about your questions. Rather than thinking about asking prospects about their pain, think about what you can teach them about their pain. And then for every question you ask, double check. Is this designed only to gain information for you, or will it also help change your prospect's perspective? And Anthony Iannarino, the author of the blog post, suggested asking questions like, what is your perspective on the trends that I've just told you about as they pertain to your future results? Which trend do you believe presents the greatest challenge for your organization? And then following up with a question like, what initiatives have you already put in place to address these challenges? What initiatives are you considering to protect your company from negative consequences in the next 12 months? So asking questions about the information you provide rather than what they already know. Deborah, anything to add here?
Well, Sam, as you were saying earlier, all of us are familiar with prospects' pain because many of them become our clients. So if we take those experiences and suggest something that's been a concern to many of our clients is A, B, and C, which of those resonates with you the most? That's giving information rather than just asking for some, and may help people look at things in a new light. So again, as you were saying, Sam, we know most of this stuff, we just forget to do it.
Right. And part of the purpose behind this thought experiment is to get you thinking about those things you already know without having to use some of these crutches. And I've encouraged you to think about a number of questions throughout this presentation. Of course, you'll be able to access the complete presentation via our insiders group on LinkedIn, and I'll link to that in our follow-up email. But here are a few more questions, some from the presentation and some new ones to help spark discussion when we open up the conversation. As you can see, the 4 on the top correspond with the 4 crutches we've talked about today. So if you couldn't mention your company, how would you establish credibility? If you couldn't offer your product, how would you help clients achieve better results? What questions can you ask your prospects to change their perspective? And if you couldn't ask personal questions, how would you strengthen trust? And then the 4 on the bottom, take it a step further and ask about the most meaningful ways you can demonstrate value in every prospect interaction. What do you know about your prospect's business that they don't? What forces will shape your client's future success that you can help address? What changes should your prospects make? What changes shouldn't they make? And then this last question, what crutches do you use and how can you use them to help provide value to your prospect? This one's important because, again, every sales rep uses crutches. Every sales rep mentions their company and product, asks questions, and seeks to build rapport, and that's all fine and good. The lesson is not to stop using crutches, but instead to avoid becoming overly dependent on them and to be smart about how you use them to motivate your prospect to action. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and everybody should be able to unmute themselves now. So I'm just going to turn it over to Deborah to help lead our discussion. And I encourage everybody to stay and look forward to hearing all your insights and ideas.